My fiancée posted you can't heal in the same place you got hurt after I paid for her therapy. When I first met her, she looked like someone trying to hold herself together with trembling hands. She had just walked out of a long, destructive relationship that had broken her self-worth into fragments. Her voice carried that mix of strength and exhaustion that only people who have fought too many silent battles possess. She told me she no longer believed in love, that men always wanted to fix what they didn't understand, and that every promise was just another form of manipulation. I listened more than I spoke. I knew what it meant to be tired of pain, so I told her we could take things slow, that she didn't have to be anyone other than herself around me. The early days were quiet and delicate. We spent long evenings talking about music, childhood, and how people forget that kindness can be powerful. She had trouble sleeping, haunted by flashes of her past. Sometimes she would wake up shaking, her eyes wide with fear, and I would sit beside her until the night softened again. There was no rush, no expectations, only a calm space where she could breathe freely. I remember one morning, she looked at me across the kitchen table and said she felt peace for the first time in years. That moment felt like winning something invisible yet priceless. But peace does not last easily for someone carrying the weight she did. She began to talk about therapy, saying she had tried before but couldn't keep up with the costs. She wanted to heal but didn't know where to start. I told her that if it helped her find herself again, I would take care of it. I researched specialists for days, comparing reviews and methods, until I found one who focused on trauma recovery. I paid for her sessions in advance and promised I would drive her every week. It wasn't about being a savior. It was about being the person who doesn't walk away when things get heavy. The first few weeks were hard. She came home drained, often silent, sitting on the couch staring at nothing. I learned not to ask too many questions. Slowly, small changes appeared. She began eating better, laughing more, walking with confidence I hadn't seen before. Her eyes, once dim and cautious, started to shine again. Every Tuesday became our quiet ritual. I would drop her off, wait outside with coffee, and afterward, we would drive to the park and talk about how she felt. It made me proud to see her rebuilding piece by piece, and I believed we were building something together. Over time, she started sharing motivational posts on social media. At first, they were gentle reminders about healing and forgiveness. I would read them with a smile, thinking how far she had come. She even thanked me once, saying I had been her anchor through the storm. But soon, the tone shifted. The quotes grew sharper, carrying undertones that didn't sit right. Phrases about breaking free, escaping toxicity, and outgrowing people began to appear. I brushed it off, convincing myself she was still processing. But a strange feeling started to crawl in the back of my mind. Her therapy became her world. She spoke often of how her therapist encouraged independence, how she needed to prioritize herself. I agreed because self-growth was essential, but I noticed her looking at me differently, as if I were part of the past she was trying to outgrow. She started canceling our regular dinners, spending more time alone, saying she needed reflection. I continued to support her, telling myself that real love gives space instead of pressure. Still, every time I saw her post something about reclaiming power or walking away from what no longer serves you, I felt an invisible wall rise between us. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she stared at the sunset and said healing sometimes meant letting go of familiar things. I nodded, unsure if she was talking about me or herself. I reminded her that not everything familiar is harmful, that some people stand beside you through the healing because they truly care. She smiled faintly, but her eyes drifted away. Weeks later, I dropped her off for another session and waited as usual. When she came out, she looked lighter, almost radiant. She hugged me, but in a distant way, like thanking someone for a kindness that had already served its purpose. I didn't say much during the drive home. That night, while scrolling through my phone, I saw her latest post appear on my feed. It was a photo of her smiling after therapy, and beneath it, the caption read, "You can't heal in the same place you got hurt." I stared at it for a long time, reading it over and over until the words blurred. It was meant to inspire, but it felt like a blade wrapped in kindness. I realized then that while I had been helping her rise, she had been slowly preparing to leave. The healing I had paid for had turned into a farewell I never saw coming. And that was the night I began to understand that sometimes, even love can become the place someone escapes from. It began with quiet shifts that almost escaped notice. At first, she started changing the time of her therapy sessions. She said her therapist wanted to explore morning energy instead of afternoon fatigue. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Then she began going alone, insisting she needed to walk afterward to reflect on her thoughts. I agreed, thinking independence was part of the process. What I did not realize was that those walks were the start of a distance that would keep growing between us. Her wardrobe changed next. The soft sweaters and jeans she once wore were replaced with bold colors and tighter fits. She began styling her hair differently, wearing subtle makeup that drew attention to her eyes. I noticed the confidence, and at first, I was happy to see her blooming again. But something in her gaze felt different. It was not just confidence, it was detachment. When she looked at me, it felt like she was looking through me. Her new friends came from her group therapy sessions. She mentioned them often, but never in detail. When I asked who they were, she said it was healthy to have people who understood her experiences. I agreed because I wanted to be supportive. But soon, her evenings were filled with plans that did not include me. Dinners, coffee meetups, art shows, all with people I had never met. When I asked to join once, she laughed and said it was not my kind of crowd. Conversations that used to bring us closer now turned into quiet disagreements. She accused me of trying to control her every time I asked a simple question. The same woman who once thanked me for being patient began to treat patience as interference. She stopped sitting next to me on the couch, stopped reaching for my hand during movies. Her laughter grew louder around others, but faded in my presence. The warmth that once filled our home was replaced by polite silence and unspoken frustration. One evening, we were watching a film together when her phone buzzed. She picked it up quickly, smiled faintly, and set it down. I caught a glimpse of the message before the screen dimmed. It said, "You deserve someone as free as you." My heart sank, but I said nothing. I stared at the screen, pretending to focus on the movie, while my mind tried to convince itself that it was just an innocent quote from a friend. That night, when she went to bed early, I sat in the dark living room and listened to the clock ticking like a quiet countdown. A week later, she asked for space. She said she needed time to understand herself, that therapy had opened memories she needed to face alone. I respected it because I believed in giving love room to breathe. I told her I would wait, that I wanted her to feel safe and free. What I did not realize was that space was not what she wanted. She wanted distance, the kind that breaks connections so slowly you do not notice until it is already over. The following weekend, I saw her post a photo on social media. She was sitting in a cafe I did not recognize, sunlight streaming through the window, her smile radiant and new. The caption below the photo read, "You can't heal in the same place you got hurt." I froze. My heart pounded as the realization sank in. I was the place she meant. I had become the metaphor in her healing story, the villain in her journey toward freedom. Friends began sending me the post, asking if everything was all right. I told them yes, even though I felt something inside me collapsing. It was strange how betrayal could wear the disguise of self-discovery. Everyone around her applauded her courage, calling her strong for walking away from what they assumed was pain. None of them knew I was the one who paid for every session that gave her the clarity to leave me behind. That night, I sat alone scrolling through her profile. Each new post felt like a piece of the life we built being rewritten without me. She had turned our memories into lessons about endurance, and my presence into a cautionary tale. The woman who once cried in my arms now spoke about freedom from emotional dependence. I wanted to be angry, but what I felt most was disbelief. I had carried her through darkness only to be treated as the darkness itself. Days turned into weeks, and the distance became normal. She stopped answering my texts, stopped coming by for her things. Her therapist's office, once a place of healing we shared in spirit, became the invisible wall that divided us. She found her freedom in the space I gave her, and I was left in silence, trying to understand how love could turn into a lesson. When I looked at her post again before deleting my account, I realized it wasn't just about her healing. It was about rewriting the past so she could live with it. I had become her reminder of pain, and she had chosen to erase me by pretending I was the wound she had finally overcome. I closed my phone and whispered to myself that maybe healing looks different when it costs someone else their peace. The truth arrived quietly, through a message I wasn't expecting. A friend sent me screenshots late at night with a short note that said, "Thought you should see this." I opened them and froze. There she was, sitting in a cozy coffee shop beside a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe late 30s, smiling at her like he already knew her heart. The caption on his story read, "Coffee with the most inspiring soul I've met in a long time." My chest went cold as I zoomed in on her expression. She was laughing, eyes closed, carefree in a way I hadn't seen in months. That moment shattered every illusion I had left. I learned later that he was someone from her group therapy sessions. A divorced man who had apparently gone through his own heartbreak. Her therapist had encouraged group support, claiming shared healing was powerful. I had supported that too, believing it would help her grow. But watching them together in that picture made me realize I had financed a connection I was never meant to be part of. While I was waiting outside every Tuesday with coffee, she was inside learning how to live without me. The next few days were a blur of disbelief. I didn't confront her. I wanted to, but something inside me said silence would hurt more than any question. Instead, I replayed every sign I had ignored. The sudden wardrobe change, the distant conversations, the way she smiled at her phone. It all made sense now. She wasn't healing from pain. She was rehearsing her exit. I had paid for the sessions that gave her the courage to move on, not from her trauma, but from me. I stopped texting her after that. I stopped checking her posts, stopped waiting for her to come back. The apartment grew quiet, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet, not the heavy silence we used to share. I started reading again, exercising, cooking for myself, rebuilding the small parts of life she had drained from me. Every day, I reminded myself that my worth was not tied to someone else's recovery. I wasn't a project or a stepping stone. I was a person who had loved honestly and lost cleanly. Weeks passed before she reached out. Her message was short and strangely familiar. She said she missed my calm energy. She said she had been thinking about me lately, that she finally understood what I meant when I told her love was about presence, not possession. I read her words twice before replying. I told her that I was in therapy now too. I was learning how to stop rescuing people who confuse healing with leaving. Then I turned off my phone and sat in silence, realizing that sometimes the best revenge is peace. Months went by, and the storm inside me slowly settled. I poured everything I had into rebuilding my life from the ashes she left behind. Work became my anchor. I started arriving early, leaving late, driven by a quiet hunger to prove to myself that I was still capable of growth. My efforts didn't go unnoticed. Within 3 months, I was promoted, and the raise allowed me to move into a new apartment downtown. The space felt different. Clean walls, tall windows, sunlight pouring in without the weight of her shadow. It wasn't just a new place. It was a restart. I began therapy for myself this time, not to fix someone else's wounds, but to understand my own. My therapist listened as I talked about how love can disguise itself as purpose, how caring can turn into self-erasure. Every session was like peeling away a layer of guilt I never deserved to carry. I learned that helping someone doesn't mean losing yourself in their recovery. Healing, I realized, wasn't about replacing someone. It was about reclaiming the parts of me I had given away. I started traveling on weekends, meeting friends I had neglected, laughing again without forcing it. Life began to feel natural, not rehearsed. Sometimes, late at night, I would scroll through my old messages with her, not out of longing, but curiosity. I wanted to understand how love could turn into silence so easily. I would read her old words about trust, faith, and forever, and feel nothing but calm detachment. It was proof that pain fades when you stop feeding it. One evening, while sitting at a cafe, I noticed something familiar. It was the same place where she had been in that photo with him months earlier. The same wooden tables, the same golden light filtering through the windows. I ordered my drink and sat in the exact spot where they had once sat. For the first time, I felt no bitterness, just closure. I took a photo of myself holding the cup, relaxed, smiling faintly. The caption came to me instantly. Sometimes the place that hurt you is the place you heal once you remove the poison. I posted it without hesitation. It wasn't for her. It was for me, a quiet declaration that I had turned the same scene that broke me into one that freed me. The photo gained attention, with friends commenting how peaceful I looked, how proud they were of my progress. I went to bed that night lighter than I had felt in years. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. It was her. She wrote that she had seen my post, that I looked happy, and that she was glad I had found peace. There was a hesitation in her words, as if she was waiting for an invitation back into my life. I read the message twice and felt no anger, no longing, just clarity. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I finished my coffee and thought about how everything had come full circle. She had once used that same quote to announce her freedom, painting me as the wound she needed to escape. Now here I was, free in the same place she had abandoned me. I finally replied with a short message that simply said, "Thank you." That was all. An hour later, she blocked me. Maybe she realized that the calm I had found was real, that her absence no longer carried meaning. Or maybe she couldn't bear to see the peace she once ruined. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter anymore. I had already won. As I looked out the cafe window that day, I understood something no therapist could ever teach. You can't save someone who confuses healing with running away. And you can't lose someone who was never truly planning to stay. Some people are not meant to be your forever. They are meant to be your lesson. And in learning that, I finally healed for real.